The council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive structure of metal and glass that housed representatives from 40 different worlds. Inside the main hall, thousands of beings watched as the trial reached its end. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few were made of pure energy. They all waited to hear what would happen to the human, who broke their most sacred law. Corporal Han Dae-hyun stood in the center of the chamber, his hands behind his back, his face calm. He wore his medical uniform with its red cross symbol, and his boots were still dusty from the battlefield where he saved those lives. The human was not tall by galactic standards, but he stood straight and looked directly at the judges without fear. Ambassador Kong Myri sat in the human section, her hands gripped together so tight her knuckles turned white. She had argued for 3 days straight, trying to convince the council to show mercy. The humans had broken the non-interference law. Yes, but they saved millions of lives during the Vrak Civil War. Surely that counted for something. The head judge was Arbiter Keldaz, a being made of living crystal that reflected light in every direction. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. The council has reached a decision. Humanity violated Protocol 7 Alpha. While your intentions may have been noble, the law exists for important reasons. If we allow one species to interfere in another's conflicts, chaos will spread across the galaxy. Dae-hyun listened without moving. He had expected this. He knew the rules when he led his medical team into the war zone. He also knew that without his help, an entire city of refugees would have died from a plague outbreak. Sometimes the right choice was not the legal choice. We have decided that one human must face punishment as an example. Keldaz continued. This will show all species that our laws have meaning. Corporal Han Dae-hyun, you'll spend 1 standard cycle in isolation with the most dangerous prisoner we hold. A wave of shock ran through the chamber. Even the other council members seemed surprised. Myri jumped to her feet. Arbiter, please reconsider. Isolation is one thing, but you cannot mean... I grabbed the world burner, Keldaz said, and the name fell like a stone into silence. Every being in the chamber knew that name. Igrath was a dragon from the Pyro system, a creature so violent and destructive that 3 colonies had burned before the council finally captured him. He was 15 meters long with scales like black armor and eyes that glowed like molten gold. His body could generate heat intense enough to melt steel. His roar once cracked the surface of the moon. For 15 cycles, Igrath had been held in a maximum security orbital station. Every handler they sent to him died. Every therapist who tried to understand him was killed within hours. The guards who delivered his food used robots because getting close to the dragon meant death. The longest any living being had survived his presence was 6 hours, and that being spent their final moments screaming. This is a death sentence, Myri said, her voice shaking with anger. You are executing him without calling it execution. Keldaz's crystalline body flickered. We are giving him a chance to survive. If he can last a full cycle, he will be freed, and all charges against humanity will be dropped. It is more mercy than your species showed our laws. Dae-hyun finally spoke. His voice was calm and steady, the same voice he used when talking to wounded soldiers in the field. I accept the terms. Dae-hyun, no! Myri turned to him. You do not have to do this. We can fight this decision. We can... Ambassador, Dae-hyun said quietly. How many people are in the human delegation? The question confused her. What? There are 200 of us here, representing Earth. And if I refuse, the council will pick someone else. Maybe you. Maybe one of the young translators who just graduated. Maybe someone with a family waiting at home. He shook his head. I am a combat medic. I have been in bad situations before. I will handle this one too. Myri wanted to argue more, but she saw the determination in his eyes. This was the same man who walked into plague zones without hesitation. The same man who stayed behind in a collapsing bunker to treat wounded soldiers while bombs fell around him. His service record showed 847 lives saved under enemy fire. If anyone could survive this, maybe it was him. You may request one item to take with you, Keldaz said. Choose wisely. My medical kit. Dae-hyun answered immediately. The full field kit, not the basic one. Several council members made sounds of confusion. One of them, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish, spoke up. You want medical supplies? To treat a dragon who will certainly kill you, I am a medic, Dae-hyun said simply. I do not go anywhere without my kit. The council discussed this briefly and agreed. After all, the human would be dead soon anyway. What harm could bandages and medicine do? They showed Dae-hyun security recordings of Igraf before he left. The dragon paced in a containment sphere like a cage storm. The sphere was transparent, a dome of reinforced glass suspended in space, 50 meters across. Inside, Igraf moved with terrible grace, his tail leaving trails of heat in the air. When he roared, the sound made the recording equipment shake. Dae-hyun watched the videos carefully. He noticed things that others missed. Igraf always gave warnings before attacking. First a low growl, then a blast of heat, then violence only if someone kept approaching. The dragon killed quickly, efficiently, but he never seemed to enjoy it. There was something in those golden eyes that looked less like rage and more like pain. Interesting, Dae-hyun muttered to himself. 2 days later, they took him to the orbital station. The journey through space gave him time to think and prepare. He organized his medical kit 3 times, making sure everything was in the right place. Bandages, medicines, surgical tools, thermal blankets, water purification tablets. Everything a field medic needed. The station workers looked at him with pity. They had seen others walk this path before. None had walked back. At the airlock, Myri was waiting. She had pulled strings to be there for this moment. The whole galaxy is watching, she told him quietly. Every major network is broadcasting this. They all expect you to die. Then I should try not to, Dae-hyun said with a small smile. It would be embarrassing for humanity. This is not funny. No, he agreed, his smile fading. But fear does not help me survive. Clear thinking does. Training does. And maybe a little bit of luck. He picked up his kit and stepped toward the airlock. Through the transparent wall, he could see the containment sphere floating in the darkness of space. Inside, a massive shadow moved. Igraf was waiting. Dae-hyun, Myri called. He turned back. Come home, she said. I will do my best, Ambassador. The airlock door opened. Dae-hyun walked through, his boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The inner door sealed behind him with a hiss. The outer door opened to a short bridge that connected the sphere. He walked across it slowly, each step careful and measured. Inside the sphere, Igraf turned his enormous head. Those golden eyes locked onto the human. The dragon's mouth opened slightly, showing teeth like daggers. Heat rippled through the air. Dae-hyun stepped into the sphere. The heat hit Dae-hyun like a physical wall. Even with his thermal suit, he could feel the temperature inside the sphere. It was like standing too close to a furnace. Igraf stood 20 meters away, his black scales reflecting the starlight that came through the transparent dome. The dragon was even larger in person than in the recordings. Dae-hyun did not run. He did not shout or raise his hands. He simply walked to a spot near the edge of the sphere, set down his medical kit, and sat down cross-legged on the floor. His movements were slow and deliberate, the same way he moved around injured soldiers who were scared and in pain. Igraf watched him with those burning golden eyes. The dragon's nostrils flared, tasting the air. Then, without warning, Igraf opened his mouth and released a blast of superheated air directly at the human. The temperature spiked instantly. Warning alarms screamed inside Dae-hyun's suit. The heat was enough to melt most metals, enough to turn stone into glass. Dae-hyun felt sweat pour down his face, but he did not move. He sat just outside the kill zone, exactly where he had calculated he needed to be based on security footage. After 10 seconds, Igraf closed his mouth. The heat dissipated slowly. The dragon tilted his massive head, confused. Every other being who entered the sphere either attacked immediately or ran in terror. This human did neither. He just sat there, breathing hard but alive. Dae-hyun waited until his suit's cooling systems brought the temperature back to survivable levels. Then he opened his medical kit and began organizing his supplies. He laid out bandages, sorted medicine bottles, checked his tools. His hands were steady despite what just happened. Igraf circled closer, each footstep making the floor vibrate. The dragon moved like a hunting cat, all coil power and dangerous grace. He stopped 5 meters away, close enough that Dae-hyun could smell the sulfur scent that came from his scales. The human continued organizing his kit. He pulled out a small notebook and began writing down inventory lists. Water purification tablets, 20. Thermal blankets, 3. Antibiotics, full supply. He worked as if he were alone, as if a 15-meter dragon was not standing close enough to bite him in half. This continued for 3 days. Igraf would circle, would test boundaries, would unleash roars that made the entire sphere ring like a bell. Each time, Dae-hyun would pause in whatever he was doing, wait for the noise to stop, then continue. He established a routine. He ate at specific times, did exercises to keep his body strong, and slept in 4-hour shifts with his back against the curved wall of the sphere. The galaxy watched through cameras mounted around a containment unit. News networks provided constant coverage. Experts analyzed every movement. Everyone expected the human to break, to panic, to die. But Dae-hyun just kept following his routine like he was on a normal military deployment. On the 4th day, something changed. Dae-hyun was doing push-ups when Igraf finally spoke. The dragon's voice was deep and rumbling, like rocks grinding together deep underground. He spoke in the common galactic language that all species learned. You do not cower. Why? Dae-hyun finished a set of push-ups before answering. He stood up, wiped sweat from his face, and looked directly at the dragon. I am a medic. My job is to keep people alive, including myself. Cannot do that while cowering. Igrath's eyes narrowed. You're not afraid? I am terrified, Dae-hyun said honestly, but fear is not useful right now. So I do what I know how to do. I follow my training. I maintain my routine. Fear does not disappear, but becomes manageable. The dragon made a sound that might have been a laugh or a growl. They sent you here to die. Yes. You know this, yet you sit here organizing bandages like you're preparing for a medical emergency. I am always preparing for a medical emergency, Dae-hyun said. That is what medics do. Igraf moved closer, his massive head lowering until he was eye level with the human. This close, Dae-hyun could see the small scars on the dragon's scales, the old wounds that healed over time. I have killed everyone they sent to me. I read the reports. I will kill you too. Dae-hyun met those golden eyes without flinching. Maybe, but I have been in bad situations before. People told me I would die in the Vrax War. They said the plague would kill me. They said the bombing in the refugee camp would kill me. I am still here. So maybe I will survive you too. Or maybe I will not. Either way, I will not spend my time being afraid. Something flickered in Igrath's eyes. The dragon pulled back and turned away, moving to the far side of the sphere. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Igrath spoke again, his voice quieter this time. Why did your kind break the non-interference law? Because people were dying? Dae-hyun said simply. There was a plague in the refugee camps. Children, mostly. The local government could not stop it. They did not have the medicine or the knowledge. My team did. So we helped. You risked your freedom for strangers. I am a medic, Dae-hyun repeated. That is what we do. Days passed. They began to talk more. Short conversations at first, then longer ones. Igrath asked about Earth, about humans, about war and medicine. Dae-hyun answered honestly, never lying, never trying to make himself seem braver than he was. In return, Igrath began to share his own story. My world was dying. The dragon said one evening as they both watched stars through the dome. A plague came. Not like your refugee camp plague. This one killed everything. Adults, hatchlings, elders. We watched our people die in agony. Dae-hyun listened carefully, his medic training making him pay attention to every detail. I went to the Galactic Council. Igrath continued. I begged them for help. I showed them the symptoms, the death counts, the projections. Do you know what they did? They quarantined your planet, Dae-hyun said quietly. He had found references to this in the old files, buried in footnotes. Yes, they sealed us in. They said it was to protect other worlds from contamination. They let millions die rather than risk their precious stability. Igrath's voice was filled with old pain. I tried to break the quarantine. I tried to reach the ships that could have brought medicine. The council called me a criminal. They sent their military to stop me. The colonies you destroyed were military installations, Dae-hyun said. It was not a question. Igrath turned his head sharply. How did you know? I read between the lines in the reports. The colonies were all in the outer rim. All had heavy military presence. All were positioned to block access routes to your system. Dae-hyun stood up and walked closer to the dragon than he ever had before. You were not trying to destroy. You were trying to save. For the first time since entering the sphere, Dae-hyun saw something other than rage in Igrath's eyes. He saw grief. I failed, Igrath said. They stopped me. They locked me here. And my people died. All of them. The plague took everyone. I am the last of my kind. Dae-hyun felt the weight of those words. As a medic, he had lost patience. He knew the pain of failure. But to lose everyone? An entire species? He could not imagine that depth of loss. Tell me about the symptoms. Dae-hyun said, "The plague. Describe what you saw." Igraf looked confused. "Why does it matter now? They are all dead." "Because I am a medic," Dae-hyun said, "and I need to know." So Igraf described it. The fever that came first, then the respiratory failure, then the bleeding. He described how fast it spread, how nothing they tried could stop it. He described watching hatchlings die in their parents' arms. As Igraf spoke, something cold settled in Dae-hyun's stomach. He knew these symptoms. Humanity had faced something similar 200 years ago. They called it the Red Death back then. It killed millions before human doctors found a cure. "Igraf," Dae-hyun said slowly, "your people could have been saved. The medicine existed. Humanity had it. Other species probably had it too. The council just needed to ask for help, to coordinate relief efforts." The dragon went very still. "They let your species die when they could have been saved." Dae-hyun continued. "The quarantine was not about protection. It was about something else." Igrath's roar shook the entire sphere. But this time it was not rage at Dae-hyun. It was the sound of a heart breaking, of hope and fury and grief all mixed together. The dragon's body began to glow with heat, scales turning red-hot. Dae-hyun did not run. He stood his ground and spoke firmly. "Igraf, look at me." The dragon's burning eyes found the human. "Breathe," Dae-hyun said, "like I showed you. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Breathe." And somehow, impossibly, the deadliest creature in the galaxy listened to the small human medic. Igraf breathed, following the pattern used for human soldiers with trauma. The heat slowly faded from his scales. Outside the sphere, billions of beings across the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The human had not died. The dragon had not killed. Something was happening here that no one expected. Something was changing. Weeks passed in the sphere, and the routine between human and dragon became something neither of them expected. Each morning, Dae-hyun would wake and do his exercises, while Igraf watched from across the dome. The dragon found human physical training amusing, especially when Dae-hyun struggled with push-ups in the higher gravity setting. "Your species is weak," Igraf commented one morning, though his tone held no malice. "We do not have scales or breathe fire," Dae-hyun replied between breaths. "So we make up for it with stubbornness and bad decisions." That actually made Igraf laugh, a sound like distant thunder. They shared meals together now, though their diets were vastly different. Dae-hyun ate his military rations while Igraf consumed the mineral supplements the station provided. The dragon needed metals in his diet to maintain his internal heat generation. Copper, iron, traces of gold. Dae-hyun found it fascinating from a medical perspective. "Your body is basically a fusion reactor," Dae-hyun said one day, making notes in his medical journal. "The way you process metals and convert them to heat energy. Human scientists would find this incredible." "Human scientists can study my corpse when I am dead," Igraf said darkly. "I will not be a laboratory curiosity." "Fair enough," Dae-hyun agreed, closing his journal. "But I am still curious. Do you mind if I ask questions? Pure medical interest, nothing else." Igraf considered this. A month ago, he would have refused. Now, he found himself wanting to talk to someone who saw him as more than a monster. "Ask." So Dae-hyun learned about dragon biology, about how their species regulated temperature, about their long lives and longer memories. Igraf remembered everything he had ever seen with perfect clarity. Every face of every dragon who died in the plague. Every moment of the battle, when the council ships shot him down. Every day of these 15 cycles in captivity. "That must be painful," Dae-hyun said quietly, "to remember everything so clearly." "It is," Igraf admitted. "Your human minds forget. You soften painful memories over time. We do not have that mercy." In return, Dae-hyun taught Igraf about human medicine, about battlefield psychology, about the breathing techniques that helped soldiers cope with trauma. He explained how human brains worked, how stress affected the body, how healing was not just physical but mental too. "You treat me like a patient," Igraf observed. "You are a patient," Dae-hyun said. "Trauma is a wound just like any other. It needs treatment." They talked about war, about duty, about the choices soldiers made. They discovered that humans and dragons had similar concepts of honor. Both valued protecting the weak. Both believed in standing your ground against impossible odds. Both understood that sometimes the right choice meant sacrificing yourself. "We are not so different," Igrath said one evening as they watched a meteor shower through the dome. Your species and mine. We both fight too hard and care too much. Maybe that is why the council fears both of us. Dae-hyun replied. This thought led to another conversation, this one more serious. Dae-hyun had been thinking about the plague that killed Igrath's people. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. He had read what few medical reports existed in the public records, and the pieces did not fit together properly. Tell me again about when the plague started. Dae-hyun said. Where was the first outbreak? Igrath's memory was perfect, so he described it in detail. The plague appeared simultaneously in 3 different cities, all on the same day. It spread impossibly fast, faster than any natural disease should spread. That is not how plagues work, Dae-hyun said slowly. Natural diseases start in one location and spread outward. They do not appear in multiple places at once unless... Unless what? Igrath leaned forward, suddenly very focused. Unless someone released it deliberately. Dae-hyun pulled out his data tablet, the one the council had allowed him to keep for medical records. He began pulling up files, cross-referencing information. The symptoms you described match a disease humanity encountered. We called it the Red Death, but the original version took weeks to kill. The version that hit your people worked in days. That means someone modified it. Igrath's eyes began to glow with heat. You think the plague was a weapon? I think we should find out. Dae-hyun worked quickly, his fingers moving across the tablet. He accessed the Galactic medical database, searching for patterns. If this was a bioweapon test, there would be evidence. Research papers, funding records, laboratory incidents. They worked together through the night. Igrath's perfect memory provided details about the plague's progression that no report contained. Dae-hyun's medical training helped him identify what to look for. Slowly, piece by piece, they began to see the pattern. There had been a secret research program 30 cycles ago. It was buried in classified files, but Igrath remembered seeing some of the scientists at council meetings. The program was supposedly shut down after protests from ethical members, but the timeline was wrong. The program ended just 3 cycles before the plague appeared on Igrath's world. They tested it on us, Igrath said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. The council created a weapon and tested it on my people. Not the whole council, Dae-hyun corrected. A faction within it. Look at these authorization codes. Only 5 council members had access to this project. The rest probably never knew it existed. They identified the 5 names. 3 were still on the council. 2 had retired but maintained influence. These were powerful beings who had covered their tracks well. The quarantine of Igrath's world was not about protection. It was about hiding evidence of their crime. This is why they locked you up, Dae-hyun realized. You were getting too close to the truth. If you had kept investigating, kept pushing, eventually someone would have looked closer at the plague's origin. And now we have the proof, Igrath said. But we are locked in a cage. What good does knowing do us? Dae-hyun smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was a smile of a man who had just found a way to win an impossible battle. We are not just locked in a cage. We are locked in a cage that the entire galaxy is watching. Every news network, every government, everyone is waiting to see if you kill me. I do not understand. What if we give them something else to watch? Dae-hyun pulled out another device from his medical kit. It looked like a standard medical scanner, but it was not. It was a military-grade transmitter, disguised and hidden among his equipment. He had carried it through war zones to call for medical evacuations. What if we show them the truth? Igrath stared at the small human with something like admiration. You had an escape plan all along. Not an escape plan. Something better. Dae-hyun began configuring the transmitter. I learned something during the Vrak Civil War. I treated soldiers from both sides, and I treated resistance fighters too. They taught me about underground networks, about how to send messages that governments cannot stop. There are hackers and activists on 1,000 worlds who would love to see the council exposed for corruption. This is dangerous, Igrath warned. If those 5 council members discover what we are doing, they will kill us immediately. They are going to kill us anyway, Dae-hyun pointed out. Better to die doing something useful. They spent the next week preparing. Dae-hyun organized all their evidence into a clear, simple presentation. Igrath recorded testimony, his perfect memory providing details that no written record contained. They gathered proof, built their case, and made it impossible to deny. Meanwhile, outside the sphere, Ambassador Myri was receiving strange messages. They came through encrypted channels from anonymous sources within the council. Someone was helping them. Someone who wanted the truth to come out. The messages contained files, classified documents, evidence of the bioweapon program. Myri realized what Dae-hyun was doing and began her own investigation. She was careful, discreet, but she started building connections with other ambassadors who distrusted the council leadership. She prepared the political ground for what was coming. On the 43rd day of Dae-hyun's imprisonment, they were ready. "Are you certain about this?" Igrath asked. "Once we start, there is no going back. They will try to silence us." Dae-hyun activated the transmitter. "I have never been more certain about anything. What they did to your people was genocide. They hid it behind bureaucracy and quarantine protocols, but it was murder. The galaxy deserves to know. And if we fail, then we fail together," Dae-hyun said. "But at least we tried. That has to count for something." Igrath lowered his massive head until he was eye level with the human. "You are a strange creature, Han Dae-hyun. Humans are supposed to be weak and fearful. Yet here you are, declaring war on the most powerful beings in the galaxy." "I am a medic," Dae-hyun said one more time. "My job is to heal and protect. Sometimes that means treating wounds. Sometimes it means exposing the people who caused those wounds in the first place." The transmitter connected to the underground networks. Data began flowing out of the sphere, spreading across the galaxy faster than any quarantine could stop it. Within hours, millions of beings were reading about the bioweapon program. Within days, it would be billions. The reckoning was coming, and standing together in their transparent prison, a human medic and the last dragon watched as the truth they unleashed spread like fire through the stars. The data spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On 1,000 worlds, beings downloaded the files and read the truth about what happened to the dragon species. They saw the research papers about bioweapon development. They read the authorization codes that proved council members knew about the program. They watched Igrath's testimony, heard his perfect memory describe watching his people die while the council did nothing. Within 3 days, protests erupted on major worlds. Citizens demanded answers. Why had the council created bioweapons when such weapons were banned by galactic law? Why did they test them on an innocent species? Why did they imprison the sole survivor instead of helping him? In the council chamber, emergency sessions ran day and night. Most council members were genuinely shocked by the revelations. They had not known about the secret program, but 5 members sat in those sessions with growing fear, knowing their careers and freedom were about to end. Ambassador Myri stood before the General Assembly and presented additional evidence her team had gathered. She had recordings, financial transfers, communication logs. Everything pointed to the same 5 council members. Her voice was steady and strong as she demanded a full investigation. "The dragon species was destroyed by our own government," she said. "And when the last survivor sought justice, we locked him away and called him a monster. We owe Igrath more than an apology. We owe him truth, accountability, and our deepest shame." The 5 guilty council members knew they were trapped. The evidence was overwhelming. Public opinion had turned completely against them, but they had one advantage. They still held positions of power, and they were desperate. In a secret meeting, they made a terrible decision. If they could not hide the truth, they would eliminate the sources. They would destroy the containment sphere with Dae-hyun and Igrath inside, make it look like an accident, and blame the destruction on equipment failure. Dead beings could not testify against them. Military ships began moving toward the orbital station under classified orders. The commanders of these ships believed they were responding to a containment breach, that the dangerous dragon was about to escape. They did not know they were being used to commit murder. Inside the sphere, Dae-hyun's transmitter picked up the military communications. His face went pale as he understood what was happening. "They are coming to kill us," he told Igrath calmly, though his heart was racing. Igrath stood, his body already beginning to glow with heat. "Then we fight." "No," Dae-hyun said quickly. "If you fight, you prove them right. You become the monster they called you. We need another way." "What other way?" "We are trapped in a sphere in the middle of space." Dae-hyun thought fast, his mind working through options. Then he remembered something from his military training. Medical distress beacons. By galactic law, any ship that receives a medical distress signal must respond. It is one of the oldest laws, older than the council itself. They will ignore it. Maybe, Dae-hyun agreed, but maybe not. And if they do ignore it, everyone watching will see them violate one of the most sacred laws in the galaxy. He activated his medical beacon, the one built into his uniform for battlefield emergencies. The signal burst out in all directions. a cry for help that could not be ignored or hidden. The response was immediate. Dozens of ships changed course toward their location. Human vessels responded first, Earth's fleet moving at full speed. But others came too. Medical ships from peaceful species, cargo haulers with doctors on board, even some military vessels from species that respected the old laws. The 5 council members watched in horror as their plan fell apart. They ordered the military ships to fire immediately before the rescue vessels arrived. The commanders hesitated, confused by the conflicting orders. There is a medical distress signal. One commander reported, "We cannot fire on a medical emergency." "That dragon is the emergency," the council member lied. "He is attacking the human. You must destroy the sphere now." But the commander had been watching the broadcast like everyone else. He had seen the human and dragon working together peacefully for weeks. He knew something was wrong with these orders. "Negative," the commander said. "I will not fire on a medical distress signal. My crew would mutiny if I gave that order." 2 other military ships agreed and refused to fire. But one ship, commanded by an officer who followed orders without question, charged weapons and locked onto containment sphere. "Incoming," Daehyun said, watching a scanner. "They are going to fire." Igraf moved faster than Daehyun had ever seen. The dragon positioned himself between the human and the direction of the threat, his massive body becoming a shield. "Get behind me." "Igraf, you'll be killed." "Better me than both of us," Igraf said. "You are small and fragile." "I am not." The weapon fired. A plasma beam lanced through space, bright enough to blind sensors. It struck the sphere, and the transparent material cracked, but held. The backup containment fields activated automatically, but the next shot would break through. Then something unexpected happened. 3 ships moved into the line of fire. They were civilian vessels, cargo ships, and medical transports. They positioned themselves between the military ship and the sphere, using their own hulls as shields. "All vessels, this is Captain Park Juno, the Earth Medical Transport Mercy. A voice broadcasts on all frequencies. We are protecting a medical emergency, as required by galactic law. Any ship that fires on us will be committing a war crime witnessed by billions." The military ship powered down its weapons. The commander could not fire through civilian vessels, not with the entire galaxy watching. More ships arrived every minute. The space around the orbital station became crowded with vessels from dozens of species. They formed a protective ring around the containment sphere. No one would be able to destroy it now without starting a war. Ambassador Myri used this moment to make her move. With the galaxy watching in outrage at its peak, she called for an emergency vote in the General Assembly, not the Council, but the assembly where every member species had a voice. "I call for immediate arrest warrants for 5 council members," she announced, naming each one. "I call for full pardons for Corporal Han Daehyun and Igrath of Pyros. And I call for a complete restructuring of council oversight to prevent such crimes from ever happening again." The vote was not even close. Species after species voted in favor. The evidence was too clear, the crime too terrible, the cover-up too obvious. Security forces entered the council chamber and arrested the 5 members. They tried to flee, tried to use their influence, but it was over. The galaxy had seen the truth, and the truth could not be buried again. Back in the sphere, Daehyun and Igrath watched the military ships withdraw. They watched the charges being read against the council members. They watched as Ambassador Myri announced their pardons. "We did it," Daehyun said quietly. Igrath was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "My people are still dead." "Yes," Daehyun agreed. "Justice does not bring them back. It never does. But at least now the galaxy knows what happened to them. They will be remembered for who they were, not as statistics in a quarantine report." "Is that enough?" Daehyun thought about all the patients he had lost over the years, all the lives he could not save despite his best efforts. "No, it is never enough, but it is what we have, and it is more than we had yesterday." The containment sphere began to depressurize as the station prepared to release them. After 67 days locked together, they were finally going to be free. Igrath looked at the human who had become his friend. "What will you do now?" "Go home, I think," Daehyun said. "See Earth again. Eat real food instead of rations. Sleep in a bed that does not curve with the wall." "And after that?" Daehyun smiled. "I am a medic. There are always people who need help." "What about you?" Igrath stretched his wings for the first time in cycles, feeling the old strength in them. "I do not know. I am the last of my kind. I have no home to return to. Then help me, Dae-hyun suggested. The galaxy is full of injustice, full of species suffering while others look away. We stop one conspiracy. There are probably others. We could find them. We could help. A human medic and a dragon, Igrass said, traveling the galaxy together. They will think we are insane. They already think that, Dae-hyun pointed out. We might as well prove them right. The airlock opened. Outside, Ambassador Myri was waiting with tears in her eyes. Behind her stood Captain Park and crews from a dozen ships, all waiting to welcome them back to freedom. As Dae-hyun stepped out of the sphere, Igrath followed close behind. The dragon had to fold his wings to fit through the airlock, but he refused to leave his friend's side. The galaxy had tried to break them by locking them together. Instead, they had forged a bond that changed everything. And this, everyone watching realized, was only the beginning. 3 cycles passed since the day Dae-hyun and Igrath walked out Containment Sphere. The galaxy had changed in ways no one expected. The Council underwent massive reforms, with new oversight committees and transparency laws. The bioweapon program was completely dismantled, and similar secret projects were exposed and shut down across multiple systems. But the biggest change was not in politics or law. It was in what people believed was possible. Dae-hyun now held the rank of lieutenant commander, though he still insisted everyone call him by his first name. He ran the Galactic Medical Initiative, a new organization created after the scandal. The initiative had one simple mission: make sure no species ever suffered like the dragons did. They provided medical aid without asking permission from governments or councils. If people were dying and help existed, the initiative brought that help regardless of politics. The organization's headquarters floated in neutral space, a station built with donations from dozens of worlds. Medical ships bearing the initiative's symbol traveled to crisis zones across the galaxy, and leading many of those missions was Dae-hyun himself, still carrying his old field medical kit, still insisting on treating the wounded personally rather than just giving orders from safety. Igrath had changed too. The Council offered him many things after his release: wealth, a planet of his own, a position of honor. He refused them all. Instead, he took on a role that no one had imagined before. He became a peace guardian, investigating potential genocides and hunting down illegal bioweapon programs. The Reform Council gave him authority to go anywhere and investigate anything. His reputation as the world burner transformed into something new. Now, when people heard his name, they thought of the dragon who stopped 4 potential extinction events, who exposed 3 corrupt governments, who saved countless lives. He was no longer the monster they feared. He was a protector they needed. The two of them still worked together often. When a medical crisis had political complications, when a disease outbreak seemed suspicious, when someone needed both healing and justice, they went together. The human medic and the last dragon, traveling the galaxy, fixing problems that others ignored. On the anniversary of the plague that killed Igrath's people, they stood together at a new memorial in the galactic capital. The monument was beautiful, made of crystal that caught starlight and split it into rainbows. Carved into its base were names. Thousands and thousands of names. Every dragon who died in the plague, remembered forever. Igrath placed one massive claw on the crystal surface, as he did every year. His eyes glowed softly in the starlight. Dae-hyun stood beside him in silence, as he always did. Some grief could not be healed, only honored. They would be proud of what you have done. Dae-hyun said quietly. Would they? Igrath's voice was soft. I cannot save them. I failed my entire species. You saved dozens of other species, Dae-hyun replied. You made sure their deaths had meaning. You made sure the galaxy learned from that tragedy. That is not failure. They stood in silence for a while longer, then turned to leave. They had work to do. A message had come in that morning about a mysterious illness spreading on a colony world. The symptoms sounded familiar, and neither of them believed in coincidences anymore. Their ship was docked nearby, a medical vessel equipped with both human technology and modifications for a dragon passenger. The crew was mixed species, all volunteers who believed in the initiative's mission. They greeted Dae-hyun and Igrath as the pair boarded. Course is set for the Helios colony, reported Lieutenant Kim Sora, the ship's navigator. She was young, barely 25, but she had already served on 3 relief missions. We should arrive in 6 hours. What do we know about the illness? Dae-hyun asked, settling into a station and pulling up medical files. Started 2 weeks ago. Sora read from her reports. Fever, respiratory issues, spreading fast. Local doctors cannot identify it. The colonial government requested help 4 days ago, but the council is still debating whether to send aid. Of course they are, Igrath rumbled. He had very little patience for bureaucracy these days. While they debate, people die. That is why we exist, Dae-hyun said. We do not wait for permission. How many infected? 200 confirmed, probably more undiagnosed. Dae-hyun worked quickly, cross-referencing symptoms with his medical database. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency. After a few minutes, he found what he was looking for. I know this disease. It is called Vega fever. We can treat it, but we need to move fast. It spreads through water supplies. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, and for 6 hours the crew prepared. Dae-hyun organized medical supplies and planned treatment protocols. Igrath studied maps of the colony, identifying where quarantine zones should be established. They had done this so many times now that they worked like parts of the same machine, each knowing what the other needed without asking. When they arrived at Helios colony, the situation was worse than reported. The infected numbered over 500. The local hospital was overwhelmed. People were dying in hallways because there were not enough beds. Dae-hyun did not waste time. He walked into the hospital still wearing his flight suit, his medical kit already in his hands. I am Lieutenant Commander Han Dae-hyun of the Galactic Medical Initiative. We are here to help. Show me your worst cases first. The local doctors were too exhausted to argue. They led him to the intensive care unit, where patients struggled to breathe. Dae-hyun moved from bed to bed, assessing conditions, giving orders, administering medicine. His team followed behind him, executing his instructions with precision. Igrath could not fit inside the hospital, so he made himself useful outside. He used his heat abilities to sterilize equipment and purify water supplies. His perfect memory tracked every patient, every symptom, every treatment. When doctors needed information, they asked the dragon, who remembered everything. For 3 days and nights, they worked without rest. Dae-hyun treated patients until his hands shook from exhaustion, then took a brief rest and continued. Igrath used his abilities until his scales dimmed from fatigue, then forced himself to keep going. The crew of the initiative pushed themselves to their limits and beyond. Slowly, the tide turned. Patients began to recover. The spread of the disease slowed, then stopped. After 6 days, the crisis was over. Not a single additional death after the initiative arrived. The colonial governor tried to thank them with an official ceremony. Dae-hyun politely declined. We're just doing our jobs. If you want to thank us, improve your water treatment systems so this does not happen again. As their ship prepared to leave, a small child approached Igrath. The dragon lowered his massive head to listen. The child held up a drawing, a picture of a dragon and a human standing together, badly drawn, but filled with color. You saved my mom, the child said shyly. Thank you. Igrath carefully took the drawing in his claw, holding it as gently as if it were made of spider silk. You are welcome. Small one, stay healthy. Back on the ship, Igrath placed the drawing in his personal quarters, adding it to a collection of similar gifts. Letters from grateful families, drawings from children, carved figures from villages they had saved. These were his treasures now, not the gold and jewels that dragons traditionally valued. Dae-hyun found him there an hour later, staring at the collection. You have quite a gallery. Each one represents lives saved, Igrath said. Lives that would have been lost if we had not acted. It reminds me why we do this work. Does it help with the grief? Igrath considered the question. No, nothing helps with that, but it gives the grief purpose. My people died because others did nothing. Now I make sure that never happens again. Every life we save honors their memory. A communication alert interrupted them. Ambassador Myri appeared on the screen, her expression serious. Dae-hyun, Igrath, I'm glad I caught you. We have a situation developing in the Outer Rim. A plague has appeared on 3 planets simultaneously. The symptoms match nothing in our databases. Dae-hyun and Igrath exchanged a look. 3 planets at once. Just like what happened to Igrath's people. Send us everything you have. Dae-hyun said immediately. We are on our way. I thought you would say that, Myri replied. Be careful. This feels too familiar. The screen went dark. Dae-hyun was already moving, calling his crew to battle stations. Sora plotted a new course. The medical team began preparing for a major operation. Igrath stood in the center of the ship's common area, his presence filling the space. It could be another bioweapon, he said quietly. Someone else playing the same games as before. Then we will stop them, Dae-hyun said firmly, just like we stopped the last ones. We know where to look for now. We know the signs. And if we are too late, if people have already died, Dae-hyun placed a hand on Igrath's scaled forearm, the gesture familiar now after 3 cycles of friendship. Then we save who we can. We find who is responsible. We make sure justice is served. That is what we do. The ship's engines powered up, preparing for the jump to faster than light speed. The crew moved with purpose, each person knowing their role. This was not just a medical mission. This was potentially another conspiracy, another crime against innocent people. But this time, the galaxy had something it did not have before. It had a human combat medic who refused to accept injustice. It had a dragon who channeled his grief into protection. It had a team that believed healing and justice were the same mission. As the ship jumped into the void between stars, Dae-hyun stood on the bridge looking out at the streaking lights. He thought about that day, 3 cycles ago, when he walked into a containment sphere expecting to die. He thought about the dragon who could have killed him but chose to talk instead. He thought about how fear and pain could transform into friendship and purpose. Do you ever regret it? Igrath asked, joining him at the viewport. They locked you in a cage with me as punishment. Your life would have been simpler if you had refused. Dae-hyun smiled. Simpler, yes. Better, no. We have saved thousands of lives together. We have stopped injustice and exposed corruption. We have made the galaxy a little bit better. How could I regret that? We were supposed to break each other, Igrath said. That was their plan. Lock the reckless human with the violent dragon and let nature take its course. They did not understand that pain shared is pain lessened, Dae-hyun replied. They did not understand that sometimes the people the galaxy calls monsters and troublemakers are the ones who actually care about doing the right thing. They thought isolation would destroy us. Instead, it gave us a partner we could trust completely. The ship continued its journey toward the outer rim, toward another crisis, toward more people who needed help. Behind them, the memorial to the lost dragon species glittered in starlight, a reminder of what had been lost and why they fought to prevent such loss from happening again. The story of the human medic and the dragon had become legend. Children across the galaxy learned about them in schools. The recording of their time in the containment sphere was required viewing in medical academies and justice studies programs. Everyone knew the tale of how they turned imprisonment into partnership, how they exposed corruption and changed galactic law. But for Dae-hyun and Igrath, it was not about being legends. It was about the work, the next patient to treat, the next injustice to stop, the next life to save. The universe had tried to break them by locking them together. Instead, they became something greater than either could have been alone. They became proof that compassion could bridge any divide, that friendship could grow in the darkest places, that hope was stronger than fear. And as they raced toward their next mission, both of them knew one thing with absolute certainty. They would never stop fighting for those who could not fight for themselves. Because that was who they were. A medic who refused to let people die. A dragon who refused to let his people be forgotten. Together, they made sure the galaxy never forgot what happened when you locked a human combat medic with the most dangerous dragon. Because what emerged from that cage changed everything.